So how inspirational was this set of talks, especially knowing that my knowledge memory is the size of a pea? It's a good beginning. I would like to discuss Bogota as a combination of bottom-up urbanism, crowdsourcing, and crowdfunding. Of course, we all know that Latin America has not only a booming economy, but also booming urbanization. Currently, 75% of all the Latin Americans live in cities. And not only that, they don't only live in cities. It's also a whole new middle class growing. The middle class currently, for the first time in history, is actually the same size as the lower income or the lowest income group. And not only does this mean something for the people, for the society, for the economy, more it means something for the city, as you can see here. Bogota is also an amazing example, not only because it has the highest urbanization rate of 5.5%, and it has also had an amazing string of mayors, in between mayors which were not so successful. Antanas Mockus and Enrique Peñalosa both have had a very, very unconservative methods and amazing success. In less than 10 years, they have actually reached or changed a city which was really overgrown with corruption, was considered the most dangerous capital in the world, and have made it into something which is actually civilized, people are concerned, and citizens are very successful in interacting with it. But why is it not working for downtown Bogota itself? Inconsistency in political rules and corruption, a mayor typically is only 3 years of rule, which is very, very short, have proven unsuccessful to actually change the city, especially the city center. So a bottom-up approach is really the only way to go for this city, or maybe for any city. And a bottom-up approach is actually in academic thinking a very normal and intriguing principle, but for urban planning it's quite unusual. And maybe why it's so interesting is because it really deals with intrinsic qualities. And intrinsic qualities, as you probably know, are qualities which are already there. So we are not making up a top-down plan. We are looking what is in the city, how can we harness that, and how can we get innovation out of that. That is not an abnormal thing in the third world. This is actually Cairo, where in an informal neighborhood, the people were seriously disturbed by the fact that the ring road was passing by, and with that, their chance to work, to civilization, to be part of a booming economy. And they decided themselves to build an off and on ramp from rubble and garbage. And not only that, they also put a little station on the top of it for the police to come and survey it, which they actually did. So that was a hugely successful endeavor. This, however, is actually still a group of people who are considered lower income. We have a different situation in Latin America, and that is that there is a growing middle class, which are going to decide the city of the future, and who currently don't have enough housing, they don't have enough of almost anything. This situation was not exactly known to me. It was introduced to me by Rodrigo Niño, the creator of My Ideal City. And My Ideal City is a non-political platform which actually combines interesting things together. Crowdsourcing, people can interact on an internet website and give direct feedback, real-time conversations with experts. But he doesn't do, or we just don't do that. It's also combined with crowdfunding. Interesting is that these discussions are an ongoing thing which constantly feed back on initiatives, proposals, and questions. This is not necessarily coming out of nowhere. The proposal, which is already being built currently in downtown Bogota, is Bidi Baketa. Rodrigo from Prodigy Network actually raised from over 3,200 investors more than $200 million to get this project built, which is not only the highest skyscraper in Bogota, where for 35 years no one has been able to raise the money to do any project this size, but it's also world's largest crowdfunding project. And BD Promotores, who sponsors this project, has then decided together with Rodrigo that this might be not the only possibility. If we can do a building, can't we look at the city? So Rodrigo came to us at Architectonics and asked us to be the lead architect and to put a team of experts together to start to look at what is a bottom-up urban proposal. How do you get it together? I have 9 minutes to tell you this, so I'm only showing 2 scenarios, but the 2 scenarios we thought were the most interesting are the most obvious also. If you look at downtown Bogota, you see it's a speck in the overall size of Bogota. It is a downtown. Now, downtown, that might mean nothing for people coming from the Americas, but actually I'm a European and we think of the city center as a city center. A city center is a combination of political, cultural, social factors, whereas a downtown in the Americas, where the term comes from, is really a business center. So what it misses in downtown Bogota is demographics. There's no people living there. And the facilities for people living there. And we realized with a mere 257,000 people living there that 1.7 million people commute daily in and out of that little tiny city center to get to their work. And often they take 4 hours to get there. So social family life is suffering a little bit there. But also what is interesting, 1 million of those people are actually students visiting the over 33 universities downtown Bogota. So thinking about that, what about if we start to think that you could house these students, over a million students, would you reduce traffic, the congestion, the pollution, improve family life so that people can actually see each other after school and after work? Yes, that would be a really, really interesting idea. So we started looking at the map of Bogota, and as you can see here, there's a really interesting region on the top for high-density housing, a really interesting region on the bottom for maybe mid-density housing, which is the bottom of downtown, which is more river-like. Question, how do you fund this? The current situation in Latin America with very high interest rates in banks and incredible unstable money values and currencies, how do you start to do that? This is where the interesting thing of crowdfunding came in. And this is where also decision-making of people comes in. So where you can start to think, and which seems maybe a quite top-down approach, you know, you start to build towers in a downtown. It's actually interesting if the people decide to build these towers, if they decide that they want their kids to live close to the universities, that's a whole other approach. So here you start to see we grow towers. BD Bogota is actually there, it's the orange tower. You start to grow towers, and then maybe it's possible that downtown starts to connect to the higher region, the more northern region, which is already the business district. So now there is maybe a weaving of culture, social life, and interactivity of students and business people. Not only that, but if you go to the lower area of the same downtown, you get an area where there is extreme low density. And we thought if you manage to change that extreme low density into something which is maybe mid-density, could you have a whole new landscape? And what would people want to do with those landscapes? And that comes to the second scenario, which is revitalization of the rivers in Bogota. Bogota is situated on the bottom of a set of hills, had 50,000 hectares of wetlands originally. The rivers are coming from the mountains, they're the source of drinking water, and currently the wetlands are 3% of what it originally was. And not only that, the rivers are canalized. They're in big concrete buckets, let's say. And the problem with that is that not only is it very dry if there is very little water, it also floods incredibly because of the concrete bed. The surrounding earth is really, really hard. So as you see here, in 2009, almost that whole area flooded, causing massive damage. And who wouldn't want to have a riverbed like this, which is actually simply a naturalized riverbed, which then allows for floodlands, it allows for urban agriculture, community gardens, and maybe eventually also change this very, very low density area where it's very, very spread out in a more ecological landscape where you start to see the river, the landscape, the agriculture, which then doesn't only provide beautiful nature, but also work, farmers markets, fair distribution of food, and hopefully also recreation, and eventually maybe Bogota would become the next location for the Olympics. Really important, of course, to close this down is that this model for my ideal city is not just for the city center of Bogota. Hopefully the needs and wants of people in the future can be decided this way through crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. Thank you.